Park Doyon stood alone in the great chamber of Corinth Prime. The room was cold. The walls were made of smooth black stone that seemed to swallow all light. 7 massive chairs rose before him like thrones, and in each chair sat a member of the Council of 7. These were the rulers of the Galactic Compact. These were the beings who controlled 1,000 worlds. Doyon was the human ambassador. He had served in this role for 12 years. He had learned their languages, studied their customs, and worked hard to build bridges between humanity and the alien races. But today, none of that mattered. The lead counselor was a Velen named Torik. He was tall and thin, with silver skin that reflected the dim light like polished metal. His eyes were large and completely black, showing no warmth or feeling. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber like the sound of breaking ice. "The Council has reached its decision," Torik said. "Humanity is expelled from the Galactic Compact. You have 30 standard days to remove all your people, your ships, and your technology from our space." Dodgen felt the words hit him like physical blows. He had feared this moment for months. There had been whispers, rumors, secret meetings he was not invited to attend. But hearing it spoken aloud made it terribly real. "May I ask why?" Doyon said. His voice was steady, though his heart was racing. Torik leaned forward slightly. "Your species is disruptive. You are unpredictable. You change things that do not need to be changed. You ask questions that should not be asked. You create chaos wherever you go. We have served the Compact faithfully for 200 years, Doyon said. Our engineers built your power grids. Our doctors cured diseases that plagued your worlds. Our traders opened routes through dangerous space that no one else would travel. And that is precisely the problem," Torik replied. "You make yourselves necessary. You weave yourselves into the fabric of our civilization like parasites. We have decided to cut you out before it is too late." Doyon looked at the other 6 counselors. There was Bryn of the Makari, a small, nervous creature covered in gray fur. There was the Dreth representative, a massive reptilian being with scales like green armor. There were others, the insectoid Keth, the gas-breathing Solani, and 2 more Valons. None of them would meet his eyes. "You are making a mistake," Doyon said quietly. "You do not understand what you are doing." Torik's thin lips curved into something that might have been a smile. "We understand perfectly, Ambassador. We are removing the chaos. The Compact will finally know peace." Far away, at the border of Compact space, Captain Kim Sunwoo received the message on his command ship. He read it twice, then a third time, hoping the words would change. They did not. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Yoon Hana, stood beside him on the bridge. She was young but sharp, with eyes that missed nothing. She watched his face carefully. "Sir," she said. Sunwoo handed her the message without a word. She read it, and he watched the color drain from her face. "They cannot do this," she whispered. "They can," Sunwoo said. "They just did." Through the viewport, he could see the alien armada that had arrived to escort them out. Dozens of Velen warships hung in the darkness like silver needles, their weapons armed and ready. They were not taking any chances. "Send the order to all human ships," Sunwoo said. His voice was flat and empty. "We are leaving." On the agricultural world of Vela 3, Dr. Choi Mingi stood in the middle of a field she had spent 15 years saving. When she first arrived, this land was dead. The soil was poisoned by centuries of bad farming practices. Nothing would grow. The Velens had given up on it, but Minji had not given up. She had studied the soil, tested it, experimented with it. She had developed new techniques that slowly brought the land back to life. Now the field was green with healthy crops that fed millions of Velen citizens, and now she had to leave it all behind. Her Velen colleagues stood at the edge of the field, watching her pack her equipment. None of them came to help. None of them said goodbye. They just watched with their cold black eyes as she loaded her bags onto the transport. One of them, a young scientist named Sarath, took a step forward as if he wanted to say something. But an older Velen grabbed his arm and pulled him back. The message was clear. Do not associate with the humans. Do not show them kindness. Let them go. Mingi climbed into the transport without looking back. If she looked back, she would cry, and she would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her tears across the galaxy. The same scene played out 1,000,000 times. Human engineers were escorted from power plants they had built. Human doctors were forced to leave patients they were treating. Human teachers said goodbye to students they would never see again. Human artists packed up their studios. Human traders closed their shops. Some of the aliens seemed sad to see them go. A few even tried to protest. But the Council's orders were absolute. Humanity was not welcome anymore. On Corinth Prime, Doyon made one final attempt. He requested a private audience with Torek, hoping that away from the other counselors, he might find some room for negotiation. Torek agreed to meet him in a small chamber off the main hall. The room was bare except for 2 chairs. They sat across from each other like old enemies. "I am asking you to reconsider," Doyon said. "Not for my sake. For the sake of your own people." Torek studied him with those empty black eyes. "You truly believe you are so important. I believe that our species have become connected in ways you do not fully understand. We have worked together for 2 centuries. Our knowledge, our systems, our solutions, they are woven into your civilization. Then we will untangle them," Torek said simply. "It may take time, but we will learn to function without you. We functioned for 10,000 years before you arrived. We will function for 10,000 more after you are gone." Doyon leaned forward. "Counselor, I have spent my life studying your people. I respect you. I admire many things about Velen culture, but I have also seen your weakness. You do not adapt. You do not improvise. When something breaks, you follow the manual. When the manual fails, you are lost." For a moment, something flickered in Torek's eyes. Doubt? Fear? It was gone before Doyon could be sure. "Your opinion has been noted," Torek said coldly. "Now please leave. You have 29 days remaining." The last human ship crossed the border exactly 30 days later. Captain Sunwoo watched on the view screen as the compact sealed its space behind them. Massive energy barriers sprang to life, cutting off any possibility of return. Lieutenant Hannah stood beside him in silence. "What happens now?" she finally asked. Sunwoo turned away from the view screen. "We go home. We rebuild. We survive. And them?" Sunwoo thought about Torek's cold certainty. He thought about all the systems humans had built, all the problems they had solved, all the connections they had made. "They will learn," he said quietly. "One way or another, they will learn." The ship turned toward human space and engaged its engines. Behind them, the Galactic Compact began its new era of peace and order. It would not last long. 3 months had passed since the humans left. On the Velen homeworld, the lights went out. It started in the capital city. One moment, everything was normal. The next moment, darkness fell across the entire district. Millions of Velens stood frozen in the sudden blackness, unsure what to do. The power grid had failed. Velen technicians rushed to the central control station. They pulled up their manuals and followed every procedure exactly as written. Nothing worked. The system refused to restart. A senior technician named Coral stared at the screens in growing panic. "This makes no sense," he said. "We are doing everything correctly." But that was the problem. The Velen power grid had been designed by human engineers. It was a beautiful system, efficient and powerful, but it was also strange. The humans had built it using methods that were not in any textbook. They had solved problems in creative ways that the manuals did not describe. When the Velens had asked about this, the human engineers had smiled and said things like, "We just figured it out," or "We tried different things until something worked." The Velens had not understood. They had simply learned to operate the systems without truly understanding how they functioned. Now the humans were gone. And when something broke outside the manual, no one knew how to fix it. The blackout lasted 3 days. By the time power was restored, 17 Velens had died in hospitals when life support failed. Hundreds more suffered in the cold darkness. And everyone began to whisper the same question. What else might break? On Corinth Prime, Counselor Torek received the reports with a calm face. Inside, his mind was racing. This was supposed to be a minor adjustment. The humans were supposed to be replaceable. That was what his advisors had told him. He called a meeting with his top scientists. How did this happen? He demanded. The chief scientist, an elderly Velen with faded silver skin, lowered his eyes. The power grid contains many irregular solutions. The humans called them patches. They are fixes that work, but do not follow standard engineering principles. We are still trying to understand them all. How many of these patches exist? The scientist hesitated. We have identified over 12,000 so far. We believe there may be many more. Torek felt something cold settle in his stomach. Fix them. All of them. That could take years, counselor. Perhaps decades. And we may not succeed. The human mind works differently from ours. They see connections we do not see. They try things that should not work but somehow do. Torek dismissed him with a wave. He did not want to hear excuses. He needed solutions, but solutions were becoming harder to find. Across the compact, the trade routes were failing. Humans had navigated paths through dangerous regions of space-unstable nebulae filled with radiation. Asteroid fields that shifted constantly, gravity wells that could crush a ship in seconds. They had flown these routes with something the Velens called reckless intuition. Velen pilots were careful and precise. They followed established procedures. They did not take unnecessary risks. These were good qualities for many things, but they were useless for navigating chaos. Ship after ship was lost trying to fly the old trade routes. Cargo that once moved freely across the galaxy now sat in warehouses, waiting for paths that no longer existed. Prices began to rise. Shortages began to spread in the financial district of the Makari homeworld. An economist named Bryn was having the worst day of his life. The entire galactic market had frozen. Trades were not processing. Accounts were not updating. The system was stuck in an endless loop that no one could break. Bren traced the problem to its source. The trading algorithms, the complex mathematical systems that managed trillions of transactions. Every day had been written by a human named Lee Taiho. He was a genius, the Makari had said. He built systems that were faster and smarter than anything else in the galaxy. But Lee Taiho was gone now, expelled with the rest of his kind, and he had taken his understanding of the system with him. Can we not contact him? Bryn asked desperately. Offer him payment to return and fix this? His superior, a large Makari with expensive jewelry hanging from his fur, shook his head. The border is sealed. The Council has forbidden all contact with humans. We must solve this ourselves. But we cannot solve it. No one understands how it works. Then find someone who does. Bren searched for 3 weeks. He contacted every Makari mathematician, every Velen programmer, every expert in the compact. None of them could understand Lee Taiho's code. It was not that the code was bad, it was brilliant. But it was also deeply human. It made leaps of logic that alien minds could not follow. The market remained frozen. Businesses collapsed. Workers lost their jobs. And the Makari began to whisper that maybe, just maybe, expelling the humans had been a mistake. The worst crisis was happening on the medical station. Helix-7. A plague had broken out among the Keith. An insectoid species with delicate biology. The disease spread quickly through their colonies, killing thousands in just a few days. Their doctors were helpless. They had never seen anything like it. Someone remembered that there had been a human doctor who specialized in Keth medicine. Her name was Han Yunji. She had spent 20 years studying Keth biology, the only non-Keth who had ever bothered to learn it in detail. Where is she now? The Keth ambassador demanded. She was expelled with the other humans, a Velen official replied. Call her back. Offer her anything she wants. The border is sealed. The council is killing my people. The ambassador screamed. His mandibles clicked together in fury. Every hour we waste, more Keth die. Children, elders, entire families. And you speak to me of council rules? But the rules held. Han Yungji remained beyond reach. And the Keth continued to die. In the art district of the capital, the galleries stood empty. The concert halls were silent. The theater showed nothing new. A young Velen named Soroth walked through the abandoned streets, trying to understand what had happened. Before the expulsion, this district had been alive with creativity. Music filled the air. Paintings covered the walls. Stories were told and retold in 100 different ways. All of it had come from humans. Soroth had not realized this until they were gone. The Velens had attended the concerts, admired the paintings, watched the plays. They had considered themselves patrons of the arts. But they had never actually created anything themselves. When was the last time a Velen had written a song? Soroth could not remember. When had a Velen painted something original? He did not know. The Velens had culture, certainly enchained traditions, formal ceremonies, precise rituals. But creativity? Innovation? The spark that made something new. That had always come from the humans. Soroth found an old poster on a wall. It advertised a human music performance from before the expulsion. The image showed a human woman holding a strange wooden instrument. Her face lit up with joy as she played. He stared at it for a long time. "What have we done?" he whispered to himself. On Corinth Prime, Counselor Torek held another meeting. This time, his calm face showed cracks. His silver skin looked dull. His black eyes were tired. "These are transition difficulties," he told the other counselors. "We always knew there would be an adjustment period." "An adjustment period does not include famine," one counselor replied. The agricultural reports from Vela 3 were disastrous. Without Dr. Choi Minji's expertise, the restored farmlands were failing. Crops that had thrived under her care were withering and dying. "Or plague," added the Keth representative. His voice was heavy with grief. 30,000 of my people are dead. The number grows every day. Or economic collapse, said Bren, who had been summoned to give testimony. The market is dying. Trade is dying. If we cannot fix this soon, entire worlds will fall into poverty. Torek stood his ground. These problems are temporary. We will adapt. We will learn. We do not need the humans. But later, alone in his private chamber, he stood by the window and looked out at the darkened city. Rolling blackouts had become common now. The power grid failed somewhere new every day. He thought about what Ambassador Park Dojan had said on that last day. You do not adapt. You do not improvise. When the manual fails, you are lost. Tariq had dismissed those words as human arrogance. Now, they echoed in his mind like a curse. He would not admit it. Not yet. But deep in his heart, Counselor Torek was beginning to understand that something had gone terribly wrong. 6 months after the expulsion, the Galactic Compact was dying. On the Velen homeworld, food riots had broken out in every major city. The carefully maintained order that Counselor Torek had promised was gone. Instead, there was chaos. Real chaos. Not the kind the humans had supposedly brought, but the chaos of hunger and fear and desperation. The agricultural world of Vela 3 had become a wasteland. Dr. Choi Min-gi's restored farmlands had collapsed completely. The soil that she had spent 15 years healing was poisoned again. The crops that had fed millions were dead and rotting in the fields. Velen scientists stood at the edge of the ruined farms. Trying to understand what had gone wrong, they had followed her methods exactly. They had used the same chemicals, the same planting schedules, the same irrigation systems, but nothing worked. What they did not understand, what they could not understand, was that Minji's methods required constant adjustment. She had watched the soil every day. She had noticed tiny changes that no manual described. She had adapted her techniques based on instinct and experience and a deep love for the land. The Velens had no such instinct. They had followed the procedures perfectly, and the procedures had killed everything. Far across the galaxy, the communication network was failing. This network was the backbone of compact civilization. It connected 1,000 worlds, allowing instant communication across vast distances. Without it, the compact would fragment into isolated pieces. Young Sorath had been assigned to investigate the failures. He was not an expert. Most of the experts had already tried and failed, but he was curious in a way that most Valens were not. He asked questions that others considered strange. He looked at problems from angles that others ignored. After weeks of searching, he found the truth hidden in the deepest layers of the system. The network was held together by human-designed solutions. Not official solutions that were documented and approved, secret solutions, emergency fixes, patches that had been applied over decades whenever something threatened to break. The humans had called it engineering with duct tape and hope. Sorath did not know what duct tape was, but he understood the meaning. The network had been slowly failing for centuries. The Velens had built it, but they had not maintained it properly. Problems had accumulated like cracks in a wall. Then the humans came. And quietly, without asking permission, they had fixed the problems. They had improvised solutions that should not have worked, but somehow did. They had held the network together through sheer creativity and determination. Now they were gone. And one by one, their patches were failing. Each failure caused others. The cracks spread faster and faster. Entire sectors went dark. Worlds that had been connected for thousands of years suddenly found themselves alone. Sorath wrote a report explaining what he had discovered. He sent it to Counselor Torek himself. He expected to be praised for his work. Instead, he was summoned to the council chamber and told to keep silent. This information must not become public, Torek said. His voice was cold, but his eyes betrayed his fear. It would cause panic. Counselor, the network is dying. If we do not act, we will act. We will find our own solutions. We do not need human tricks. But they did need human tricks. That was the terrible truth that Torek could not accept. While the Velens struggled, or erupted between the Makari and the Tread. It started over trade disputes. With the galactic economy in ruins, resources were becoming scarce. Both species claimed rights to the same mining asteroid. Neither was willing to compromise. For 200 years, such disputes had been resolved peacefully. Human mediators had traveled between the conflicting parties, listening to both sides, finding common ground, building agreements that everyone could accept. The humans had a strange gift for this work. They could understand beings completely unlike themselves. They could see the world through alien eyes. They genuinely cared about helping others, even others who were different and strange. Without them, old hatreds came rushing back. The Makari remembered ancient wrongs done by the Dreth. The Dreth remembered insults from generations past. Small arguments became large arguments. Large arguments became threats. Threats became violence. The first shots were fired over the mining asteroid. Within days, the conflict had spread to a dozen worlds. Makari and Dreth warships clashed in battles that left thousands dead. On Corinth Prime, Counselor Torek tried to negotiate a peace, but he had no talent for it. He spoke in terms of rules and procedures and proper behavior. He told both sides what they should do according to compact law. Neither side cared about compact law anymore. They wanted justice. They wanted revenge. They wanted someone who understood their pain. Torek could not give them that. He was Velen. His people did not feel things the way others did. They were logical, rational, cold. These were strengths in many situations. But in a negotiation between two furious species, they were weaknesses. The war continued to grow, on the border of human space. Captain Kim Sun-woo watched the chaos unfold from a distance. He had set up a monitoring station on the colony. World of New Busan, every day. His team intercepted communications from compact space. They gathered intelligence, tracked developments, documented the collapse. Lieutenant Yoon Hannah brought him the latest reports. Her face was grim. The Keth Plague has spread to 3 more worlds, she said. Death toll is now over 200,000. The Velen power grid failed again yesterday. This time it lasted a week. The Makari-Dreth war has escalated, and the communication network is down to 60% capacity. Sun-woo studied the reports in silence. He had predicted this. On that last day, as the human fleet crossed the border, he had known that things would fall apart. He had just not expected it to happen so fast. They are transmitting distress signals, Hannah added quietly. Hundreds of them. From all over compact space. Distress signals to whom? Hannah looked at him with complicated eyes. To us. To human space. They are begging for help. Sunwoo put down the reports. He walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, civilizations were burning. Children were dying of plague and hunger. Worlds were tearing themselves apart. They threw us out, he said softly. They called us chaos. They sealed the border and left us to die in the darkness. Yes, Hannah agreed. They did. And now they want our help. Yes. Sunwoo was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy. Send a message to Coalition Command. Tell them we need to discuss our options. On Corinth Prime, Counselor Torek faced his final humiliation. A mob had gathered outside the council building. Thousands of angry Velans, hungry and afraid, demanded answers. The other 6 counselors had already fled or been killed. Torek alone remained, standing at a window watching his world collapse. His aide, young Velan named Ren, approached him nervously. Counselor, there is news. Hundreds of worlds across the compact are transmitting messages toward human space. They are asking for help. Torek closed his eyes. 6 months ago, he had sat in this building and pronounced humanity expelled. He had called them disruptive. He had called them chaos. He had promised that the compact would be better without them. Now the compact was dying. And its people were crying out to the very beings he had cast away. They will not come, Torek said. We expelled them. We humiliated them. We sealed them out like criminals. Why would they help us now? Ren did not have an answer. Torek turned back to the window. The mob was growing larger. Soon they would break through the doors. Soon they would come for him, demanding someone to blame for all their suffering. He thought about Park Doyen, the human ambassador. He remembered their last conversation. He remembered the man's quiet warning. You do not understand what you are doing. Torek understood now. He understood perfectly. He had removed the chaos. And in doing so, he had removed the only thing holding his civilization together. The mob broke through the doors. Their angry roars echoed through the building. Torek did not run. He stood at the window and waited for whatever would come next. He had nothing left to do but hope. Hope that somewhere in the darkness, the humans they had wronged might find it in their hearts to forgive. The Emergency Council met in the Capitol building of New Busan. President Seo Yujin sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by the most powerful humans in the galaxy. Admiral Baek Jinwoo was there in his crisp military uniform. Ambassador Park Do-yeon had come despite his age and weariness. Dr. Han Yoonji, attended by video link from her research station. Captain Kim Sun-woo and Lieutenant Yoon Hannah represented the border forces. The room was tense. Everyone knew why they were here. The distress signals from compact space had become impossible to ignore. President Seo spoke first. You have all seen the reports. The compact is collapsing. Their people are dying by the hundreds of thousands. Their worlds are falling into chaos, and they are begging us for help. She paused and looked around the table. The question before us is simple. What do we do? Admiral Baek answered immediately. Nothing. We do nothing. Several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Admiral continued, his voice hard as stone. 6 months ago, they expelled us like criminals. They sealed the border. They left our people stranded, confused, and humiliated. Families were separated. Careers were destroyed. Our doctors were forced to abandon dying patients. Our scientists watched their life's work crumble. He leaned forward, his eyes burning. And now they want our help? Now they remember how valuable we are? I understand your anger, President Seo said carefully. We all share it. Then let them suffer the consequences of their arrogance. Let them learn what happens when you cast aside the people who kept your civilization running. In a year, maybe 2, they will collapse completely. And then we can return in our terms, not theirs. There was silence around the table. Many faces showed agreement with the Admiral's words. The wound of expulsion was still fresh. The desire for revenge was strong. But Dr. Hanhunji's voice came through the video link. Quiet but firm. I need to say something. Dodd. Please, doctor. Before the expulsion, I spent 20 years studying Keth biology. I learned their language. I attended their ceremonies. I watched their children hatch and grow. Her voice wavered slightly. When the expulsion order came, I had to leave patients behind. Patients I loved. Patients who trusted me. That was the worst day of my life. She paused, collecting herself. But right now, on Helix 7, Keth children are dying. Not soldiers. Not politicians. Children. Innocent beings who never voted to expel us. Who never hated us. Who were simply caught in a disaster they did not cause. Admiral Beak started to respond, but Yanji cut him off. I've spent the last 6 months working on a cure for the Keth plague, alone, in exile. Because I could not stop caring about them, even after they threw me out. And now I have something that might work. A treatment that could save millions of lives. Her eyes were fierce through the video screen. If we let them die because we want revenge, we are no better than the council that expelled us. The room fell silent again. This time, the silence had a different quality. Ambassador Park Do-yan spoke next. His voice was gentle, tired, but filled with conviction. They cast us out because they feared what made us different. Our creativity, our adaptability, our refusal to accept that problems cannot be solved. They saw these things as threats instead of gifts. He looked around the table at each face. If we abandon them now, we prove them right. We show that humanity only acts from self-interest. That we help only when it benefits us. That we are exactly what they accused us of being. And if we help them, Admiral Beak asked. What does that prove? Do-yan smiled sadly. It proves they were wrong about everything. Captain Sunwoo, who had been silent until now, spoke up. I watched them seal the border. I escorted our ships out of their space while their weapons pointed at us. I will never forget that moment. He paused. But I also remember the aliens who tried to say goodbye. The Velen colleagues who wanted to help but were too afraid. The young ones who looked at us with confusion instead of hatred. Not everyone wanted us gone. Many of them are suffering now because of decisions made by a few powerful people, Lieutenant Hannah added quietly. Is it fair to punish the many for the sins of the few? Admiral Beak shook his head. You speak of fairness? Was it fair when they expelled us? Was it fair when they sealed the border? No, Hannah admitted. It was not fair. But doing the right thing has never been about fairness. It has been about who we want to be. President Seo Yujin listened to all of this without interrupting. She was a small woman, unremarkable in appearance, but her mind was sharp and her heart was strong. She had led humanity through the darkest days of the expulsion. Now she would lead them through whatever came next. I have heard all your arguments, she said finally. The anger is justified. The desire for revenge is understandable. If we choose to do nothing, no one could blame us. She stood up and walked to the window. Outside the city of New Busan, spread across the landscape a testament to human resilience. They had built this place from nothing after the expulsion. They had survived. They had thrived. But I did not become president to do what is easy or what is justified, Seo continued. I became president to do what is right. And right now, millions of beings are dying. Beings who may have wronged us. Yes. But also beings who are innocent. Children, families, people who simply want to live. She turned back to face the council. We will help them. Not because they deserve it. Not because we owe them anything. But because helping those in need is what humans do. It is who we are. It is why they needed us in the first place. The decision was made. Within hours, the human fleet mobilized. Not for war, for rescue. Ships loaded with food, medicine, and equipment launched toward the sealed border. Engineers, doctors, scientists, and mediators volunteered by the thousands. Captain Sunwoo led the first wave. His ship, the Horizon, crossed into compact space at the head of a convoy of 50 vessels. The border defenses that had once kept them out were silent, now too broken to function, too understaffed to operate. On the bridge, Lieutenant Hannah watched the scanner display light up with contacts. Alien ships everywhere, drifting without power, their crews desperate for help. Where do we start? She asked. Sun Wu looked at the overwhelming display of suffering before them. It would take years to fix everything that had gone wrong. Maybe decades. Maybe longer. We start everywhere, he said. At the same time, we split up. We spread out. We help whoever we can reach. That is how humans do things. On Vela 3, Dr. Choi Minji returned to the fields she had once saved. They were dead now, brown and lifeless under a gray sky. Velan farmers stood at the edges, watching her with shame in their eyes. One of them approached her. It was Sarath, the young scientist who had tried to say goodbye months ago. I am sorry, he said. His voice broke. We tried to follow your methods. We did everything you wrote in your books. But we failed. Mingy looked at the ruined land. 15 years of work, destroyed in 6 months. She could have been angry. She could have blamed them. She could have turned around and left. Instead, she knelt down and picked up a handful of dead soil. She studied it carefully, feeling its texture, smelling its composition. Your soil needs different treatment now, she said calmly. The conditions have changed. We will need to adapt. Sarath stared at her. You will help us. After what we did? Minji looked up at him. Her eyes were kind. You did not do anything. Your leaders did. And even if you had, the soil does not care about politics. The crops do not care about grudges. They only care about being given what they need to grow. She stood up and brushed off her hands. So that is what we will do. We will give them what they need. And we will start over, on Helix 7. Dr. Han Yunji arrived with her experimental treatment. The Keth medical staff met her with desperate hope. Their hospitals were overwhelmed. Their people were dying faster than they could count. Yanji did not waste time with greetings or explanations. She went straight to work, administering her cure to the sickest patients first. Within days, the death rate began to fall. Within weeks, the plague was under control. A Keth elder approached her when the crisis had passed. He was ancient, his carapace worn and faded with age. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. You saved us, he said. After we cast you out, after we let you go without thanks, you came back and saved us. Yunji was exhausted, running on little sleep, her hands still stained with medicine. But she managed a tired smile. I did not save you for thanks, she said. I saved you because you needed saving. That is all. The elder was silent for a long moment. Then he bowed his head, a gesture of deep respect in Keth culture. We did not deserve you, he said. But perhaps one day we will. On Corinth Prime, Counselor Toric watched a human medical team distribute food to starving Velan children. He had survived the mob barely. He had hidden while others were killed. Now he emerged from the ruins of his power to witness something he had never imagined. The humans had come back. Not with weapons. Not with demands. They had come with food and medicine and open hands. A human woman noticed him watching. She walked over and offered him a package of emergency rations. You look hungry, she said simply. Toric stared at her. He could not speak. This woman, this human, was helping the very people who had expelled her kind. She had no anger in her eyes, no hatred, only calm compassion. 1 year had passed since the expulsion. The galaxy had changed forever. The Galactic Compact no longer existed. Its old structures had crumbled completely during the collapse. The Council of Seven was gone. The ancient laws and traditions that had ruled 1,000 worlds for centuries had been swept away like leaves in a storm. But something new had risen in its place. They called it the United Galactic Assembly. This time, humans were not guests or outsiders. They were founding members, equal partners at every table, respected voices in every debate. The assembly was built on different principles than the old compact. It valued cooperation instead of hierarchy. It welcomed new ideas instead of fearing them. It treated differences as strengths instead of threats. The new capital was built on a world that had no history. No ancient grudges, no bitter memories. Humans and aliens worked together to construct it, Velen engineers and human architects, Makari traders and Keth artists, Dreth builders and Solani designers. Every species contributed something unique. Every species mattered. Captain Kim Sun-woo now commanded a joint fleet of human and alien vessels. His flagship was called the Unity, and it served as a symbol of everything the galaxy had learned. On its bridge, humans and aliens worked side by side, sharing duties and responsibilities equally. His first officer was Sarath, the young Velen who had uncovered the truth about the communication network. After the collapse, Sorath had worked tirelessly with human engineers to rebuild the system. He had learned to think like them, to improvise, to adapt, to try things that should not work but somehow did. Sorath said one day as they watched the stars from the bridge, I used to think humans were strange. Your methods made no sense to me. Your creativity seemed like chaos. Sun-woo smiled. And now? Now, I understand that chaos is not always destruction. Sometimes it is creation. Sometimes you need to break the old rules before you can build something better. That might be the most human thing anyone has ever said to you, or Sarast. Silver Skin shifted slightly, the Velen equivalent of a laugh. I will take that as a compliment. On Vela 3, the fields were green again. Dr. Choi Minji had spent the past year not just restoring the soil, but teaching others how to do the same. She had trained a new generation of alien scientists, Velens, Keth, Makari, and more. She taught them not just techniques, but the philosophy behind them. Land is alive, she told her students. It changes constantly. You cannot just follow a book. You have to watch, listen, feel. You have to adapt your methods to what the land needs today, not what it needed yesterday. Her students struggled at first. The concept of adaptation was difficult for species that had relied on rigid procedures for thousands of years. But slowly, they began to understand. They learned to observe without judging. They learned to experiment without fearing failure. They learned to trust their instincts. A young Velen named Ren, the same aide who had served. Counselor Torek became one of her best students. He had lost everything during the collapse. His family had died in the famines. His career had been destroyed. But instead of giving in to despair, he had found new purpose in learning from the humans. You gave me something to believe in, he told Mingi one day. When everything else was gone, you showed me that we could rebuild, that we could learn, that we could become better than we were. Minji put a hand on his shoulder. You did the hard work yourself. I just showed you it was possible. On Helix 7, Dr. Han Yun-ji had established the first cross-species medical institute. Human doctors worked alongside Keth physicians, Velen healers, and Makari surgeons. They shared knowledge freely. They learned from each other constantly. The Keth plague was a distant memory now. But the institute had discovered something more important than any cure: the power of collaboration. By combining human creativity with alien knowledge, they had developed treatments that none of them could have imagined alone. The Keth elder, who had thanked Young-ji during the crisis, became a regular visitor. He was too old to practice medicine himself, but he spent his final years teaching young Keth doctors about the old ways, the ancient healing, traditions that had been forgotten during the centuries of compact rule. Our ancestors knew things. We have lost, he told Yoon-ji. Your people helped us remember. Perhaps that is the greatest gift of all. The Makari-Dreth War had ended within weeks of the human intervention. Ambassador Park Doyon had led the peace negotiations himself. Traveling between the two species with endless patience and genuine care, he had listened to their grievances. He had acknowledged their pain. He had helped them see that their conflict was destroying both of them while solving nothing. Slowly, carefully, he had built a bridge between enemies. Now, the Makari and Dreth shared the mining asteroid that had started the war. They had created a joint operation that benefited both species equally. Former soldiers worked side by side in the tunnels, discovering that they had more in common than they had ever imagined. One day, a Makari worker and a Dreth miner sat together during their lunch break. They talked about their families, their hopes, their dreams. They laughed at each other's jokes. A human observer watched them and smiled. This was why humanity had returned. Not for power or revenge or recognition, but for moments like this, moments of connection between beings who had once hated each other. On the first anniversary of the expulsion, President Seo Eugene addressed the United Galactic Assembly. The Great Hall was filled with representatives from every species in the galaxy. Humans sat beside Velans. Makari shared benches with Dreth. Keth and Solani occupied the same sections without tension or fear. It was a sight that would have been unthinkable a year ago. President Seo stepped up to the podium. She was the same small, unremarkable woman she had always been, but her presence filled the room. 1 year ago, she began, we were expelled from this galaxy. We were told that we were chaos, that we were disruptive, that we were unpredictable. We were told that the compact would be better without us. She paused and looked around the vast assembly. They were right about one thing. Humans are unpredictable. We solve problems in ways nobody expects. We connect with beings utterly unlike ourselves. We create, adapt, and endure. When we see suffering, we cannot look away. When we see injustice, we cannot remain silent. When we see a problem, we cannot stop until it is solved. Her voice grew stronger. They tried to remove us. And only then did they discover the truth. The chaos they feared was not a disease to be cut out. It was the energy that kept everything moving. It was the creativity that solved impossible problems. It was the compassion that held different species together. She smiled a warm, genuine smile that reached across every division. We did not return because we wanted revenge. We returned because you needed help. And helping those in need is who we are. It is what makes us human. The assembly erupted in applause. Alien hands and claws and tentacles created a sound like thunder, rolling through the hall in waves of gratitude and respect. Later that evening, Captain Sunwoo and Lieutenant Hannah stood on a balcony overlooking the new capital. Below them, a celebration filled the streets. Humans and aliens danced together, shared food, told stories. Children of different species played games, their laughter rising into the night air. Do you think it will last? Hannah asked. Sunwoo considered the question carefully. He thought about Counselor Torek, who now served as a cultural liaison in the new assembly, a position Ambassador Doyon had created for him despite everything. He thought about the old fears and prejudices that had driven the expulsion. He thought about how easily such things could return. No, he admitted. Not forever. Fear does not disappear overnight. Prejudice lingers. Somewhere, someone is already planning to turn back the clock. We will face distrust again. Maybe worse. Then why did we help them? Why did we give them another chance? Sunwoo watched a group of children below human, Velen, Keth, Makari running and laughing together without any awareness of the history that separated their peoples. Because that is what humans do, he said. We help. Even when it costs us. Even when it is not fair. Even when the people we help might turn on us again someday. We help anyway, and hope that eventually it matters. Hannah followed his gaze to the children. She watched them play for a long time. If it does not matter, if they turn on us again? Sunwoo turned to face her. His eyes held a strange mixture of sadness and hope. Then we will survive. We always do. We will adapt, rebuild, find new ways forward. That is what we are good at. He looked back at the celebration below. But I would rather spend my life building something worth believing in than live in a galaxy defined by grudges. Would you not? Hannah thought about everything they had been through. The expulsion, the exile, the collapse, the rescue, the rebuilding. All the pain and anger and loss, and all the moments of connection that had made it worthwhile. Yes, she said quietly. I would. The night grew darker, but the celebration continued. Lights twinkled in windows across the city. Music drifted up from the streets. Somewhere a human was teaching an alien child to dance. Somewhere else, an alien was showing human children how to count stars. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Old enemies would plot. New crises would emerge. The fragile piece would be tested again and again.